The famous saying in political diplomacy goes, "In the midst of chaos, there is an opportunity." That appears true in the wake of the Russian-Ukraine war. The whole world witnessed a geopolitical shift after the emergence of the Russian-Ukraine war. While many of us think that Russia or any other stakeholder will have their fair share due to this conflict, there is only one country that is believed to exploit this crisis. That country is the People's Republic of China. It may seem interesting to many that China will benefit from the ongoing war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is a conflict between two superpowers in the current world order, Russia and the US. But some experts claim that neither of the two will gain any political or economic advantage. Let's analyze how China has put itself in a position to take advantage of this hot situation. For years, China and Russia have maintained strong relationships that extend way beyond their ideological standpoints. But the relationship took a new turn after the war in Ukraine started. In February 2022, Russia fired dozens of missile strikes on Ukraine with the intent of a full-scale war. Russian ground forces acted quickly and dominated a large portion of Ukrainian cities and land masses. Russia has a simple rhetoric: to deter any upcoming NATO expansion on its borders. For this, China supported Moscow's cause for the security concerns and regarded it as a danger to one's sovereignty and territorial significance. On the other hand, Ukraine had its hands full with the US arms supply and the support of the European Union behind its back. In a recent development, Ukraine received a whopping $54 billion from the EU to manage its losses and strengthen its borders. Adding to that, Moscow underestimated Ukraine's defense capabilities and the increased support from the EU. So it had to face strict deterrence from the advanced weapons and artillery of NATO. This could end Russia's objective once and for all if China wasn't there to take its hand. Beijing proved to be an economic lifeline to Russia after later facing economic sanctions by the US and the EU. The European market banned imports of oil and exports of high-tech products to the Russian market after the imposition of sanctions. These sanctions were meant to cripple Moscow's military and economic capabilities. Due to this, the overall trade of Russia with the EU, the UK, and the US witnessed a historic downfall in the second half of 2022. But in 2022, China's overall trade to Russia set a record of $190 billion, surpassing 30% a year before. So after all this, China became the most important trading partner for Russia after the war. But despite helping Moscow to continue its costly war in Ukraine, China adopted a manipulative policy. On one hand, Beijing stressed neutrality, while on the other, it kept providing arms and weapons to Russia with other trade incentives. Like other non-Western countries, China has also provided its stance on the war in Ukraine and its foreign policy approach. Chinese President Xi Jinping claimed that Beijing's stance is neutral in this war, but it seems it is more than ready to help Russia win this war. Also, if Moscow ends up losing this war, then it is a win-win situation for Beijing. In a report, China stated that the US should be blamed for the war in Ukraine because it ignored the security concerns of Russia constantly. China also held the stance that the US is dragging out the war in Ukraine for its vested interests in the region and to deter Russian influence in Eastern Europe. Moreover, Beijing urged that non-Western countries should have a more decisive role in the international system of blocs and alliances. As mentioned earlier, a conflict or crisis creates an opportunity. In today's multipolar world, a war in one region can prove fruitful in another. That is true in the Russian-Ukraine war too. Many think tank experts claim that China is the sole winner in this war. But why and how could this war turn in Beijing's favor? Let's unfold the mystery. For years, China remained a peaceful giant lurking in the shadows of soft power. But like other populist leaders, Xi Jinping had his own set of goals to steer his nation one day to be the only superpower in the world. There are many gains for China if Russia loses this war. First of all, this prolonged war can make Russia weaker, and a fundamental shift from the Sino-Russian balance of power will move to only China in the coming years. So a war ravaged and exhausted Russia will enhance the possibility of China's influence over the globe against the US. Secondly, China has gained a significant advantage in the world market because of its cheap Russian energy. So in this case, China has a huge competitive market due to cheap oil and gas to fill its national coffers the whole year. Not only this, Russian gas exports to China increased more than double in 2022. Thirdly, China has some other plans to modernize its military and stand up with that of Russia and the US. For that purpose, Beijing is negotiating with Moscow to have access to its advanced military technology. It is quite interesting because China is way behind Russia and the West, especially in submarine propulsion systems. This access will help Beijing have a closer look at the Russian hypersonic missile technology, which is much more advanced. There is another possibility that is negligible but not zero. The world has witnessed the fall of a Russian state in the wake of a foreign war in the past, like in the Soviet-Afghan War. Likewise, in this case, Beijing benefits heavily if Russia's central and eastern parts get fractured and Chinese vassalization could take place. Yes, China could vassalize Russia if it gets weaker and weaker. So Xi Jinping's vision to make China a great national strength could be fulfilled. As China has risen as a major trade partner for Europe in recent years, tying it to its market will alienate Moscow from its very market. That means Russian energy exports will start falling down again, and an economic recession will end Russian influence once and for all. That could mean a win-win situation for China in Eurasia. Not only this, if China ties up Europe to its market, then it will isolate the US and its influence. So this geostrategic transformation will ignite a fire that the world has never seen for centuries. Moreover, China is ready to accept a partial weakening of Russia because that will make Moscow dependent on it and the eastern markets. This will enable China to utilize Russia as a resource asset and expand Beijing's influence in the Russian market and key economic and industrial sectors. It is evident that a war in Ukraine puts China in geostrategic competition with the US. So China will never endorse any sanctions against Russia because that would mean submission to the US. Likewise, these policies appear to be lucrative for China in the years to come. What are your thoughts about it? Do you think China is the only winner in the Russian-Ukraine war? Let us know in the comments section. For more such videos, check out our next video and don't forget to subscribe.